So I'm with Kent Smith, and we're talking about the Moonlight Gathering that's coming up this 2023. It's going to be the last weekend in July, Friday and Saturday, and there's going to be a lot of cool things going on. But Kent, man, you was telling me a story about an outlaw hideout that you'd seen when you was younger and was shown to you. Tell me that story. Tell these guys that story.
All right, Terry asked me to tell this to him when he's got a camera. We've talked about it a little bit and that, and I told him, well, this is one of them I give him everything I have on it. This is one I can't give you all the information simply because we haven't checked out all the stuff as good as we'd like. But tell you the basic story, and this is when I was a young man, and I'm old codger now, but when I was a young man, my scout leader, my first scout leader, who got to be like a father to me, and he would take me out quite a bit. He's one of the reasons I was already a little bit into old and ancient stuff, but he really got me interested in Indian stuff and outlaw stuff, and that he'd take me out as a young person. His son was my best friend, and so he took me one time, and we went up towards Flaming Gorge out of Vernal, and we parked, and we won't divulge where that's at because it's too easy to find if I told you. But we parked and we went over, and there was a drainage, and we started climbing down into the drainage. And the place we were at, to get down into the drainage, you had to go over a lot of ledges that were 6 to 10 foot maybe high or something, and pick your way down and to off some ledges, and it was, the whole thing was made out of rock. It wasn't dirt. It was pretty steep all the way down, and so you'd pick your way down through all these boulders and rocks and ledges and cliffs and that. And so we went down quite a ways, about halfway down the drainage to the bottom, and we were on a flat place that had dirt on it. You could stand. It was maybe the size of my living room or something. It was probably, I don't know, 10 by 20 or something like that feet with dirt, and there was one tree growing in the middle of it. And then after that, you'd go down off another ledge, and you just keep going down. But we stopped there and we're standing there by this tree, and he says, so look around and tell me if you see anything unusual or that. And so I looked around, and it was just a dirt patch with a tree and ledges, and I looked at the rocks, and they didn't look anything different, just boulders and rock faces and one thing or another. I said, nothing looks different to me. And he says, you're standing on the roof of what I brought you to show you. And so we climbed down on the sides, and it was a cabin, and as he started telling me the story and showing it to me, he figures it was because you had so much outlaw traffic up through Brown's Hole and all those places up by Flaming Gorge. He figured it was one of the outlaw cabins and that they would.
So let me stop you real quick. So don't forget where you're at. So when you're talking outlaws, you're talking about Butch Cassidy, the Sundance Kid, all them outlaws. So
yeah, a lot of famous outlaws would go between Vernal and up through the Flaming Gorge area, and on up into Wyoming and those kind of things right there. And so a lot of outlaw traffic is known to have gone down through that area. Well, this cabin that he showed me had two natural sides by the cliffs. And then one end and one side was just rocked up with flat piece of rock and made like a rock cabin. And then when we went inside, it had timber roofing and that, and it was still in good enough shape. There was a tree growing in the bottom of the cabin that grew up through the roof. They roofed right around it. That was the tree that we stood by, and and as I recall, I think there was one little tiny window. Maybe there wasn't, but I think there was one little tiny window, and in the one narrow end there was a doorway, and that was it. And it was just a one-room cabin with a dirt floor, and so you couldn't see the cabin. You couldn't see the side that was rocked up. The two sides that were rocked up, the one where the doorway was and the other longer one, you had to be within about 3 feet. It was heavy timber and stuff, and you couldn't see it if you was 20 feet away from it. You couldn't see any of it. He'd found it elk hunting, and so we looked at that, and just a super cool thing, because it's halfway up these cliffs and that. It's not somebody's summer home. It's not, I mean, for somebody to climb up the cliffs and everything and build this thing, it's hard to get to. You've got to pick your way around through boulders and that, and for somebody to go up and collect enough rocks to rock this thing up and build it and that, they had to be really serious to build this thing. You could, if you put sleep bags in there and so forth, you could probably sleep 20 people in there or something, you know. It was probably big enough for that, or, you know, 15 or something. But there was just the one room there. It wasn't like they had other rooms or anything like that. And
Did they have like a fireplace or anything in
No, there was no fireplace in or anything. One of the problems is, I was probably in my early teens when he took me up and showed me, and so I would take up a few close friends from that point on, just a handful here and there, and I'd take them down and show them that. After I'd shown a few people, circumstances happened where more people were by accident finding this thing, and I took a group up years ago and lit a fire inside and burned the timbers out. Terrible. And the roof had collapsed. Terrible. And so there was the two rocked up walls and that, and I still continued to take people up and tell them the story and show this to them. But every time I went up, more people had got in there and pushed the walls down and all that kind of stuff. And now if I was to take you up and show you, I don't think that you would even know that there had ever been anything there other than the story, because people have totally destroyed it, which is pretty common with, I could tell you probably hundreds of stories of those kind of things too. Cabins, we found different things, and if you're lucky and it's far enough out, they're just rotting away. You know, some of the really old cabins that I know about have rotted to the point where there's no logs anymore. You can see the rectangle because the weeds won't even grow where the perimeter of the cabin was on the really old ones, and usually there was a fireplace, and so you can see the rock work in the one end where the fireplace was, and you can see a perfect rectangle, the perimeter of cabins on the really old ones. And then as you get into Pioneer, that would be Spanish and those kind of things. And then as you get into Pioneer cabins and that kind of thing, they're collapsed roofs and the walls falling down or sagging real bad, those kinds of things. But the really old cabins have been there so long that there's nothing left. They've rotted right away. So, but and I can tell you a pretty cool story about that. Another place that I need to take you up, and we need to go look at it, because I've only found it once and never been back, but on an old Spanish cabin up in the Uintas there. But that's pretty cool. But site. But
well, let's hear about it.
You ready?
Yeah.
Again, this one's too easy for people to find if I tell them kind of how I come across it, but I don't think hardly anybody's ever found it. But it wouldn't be that hard. But anyway, it's up in an area that I've spent quite a bit of time taking people up and showing them things, and it's around the Red Cloud Loop. For those people that are familiar with the Red Cloud Loop, comes up through Dry Fork Canyon, where there's a lot of Spanish stuff out of Vernal, and it loops up through the Uintas, through BLM and the forest ground, and eventually come back out on the highway, and you can go up to Flaming Gorge that way. But they're one of the places where I've taken quite a few people over the years, and we've done some spelunking, and I used to do that when I was younger, and I'd take people way underground on some caves and stuff, and anyway, there's a stream that runs into the opening to the cave, and I'd always just hiked down off the road and stuff. It's quite a hike to get down into it, but hiked down there and just gone in the cave spelunking. And one time I decided, hey, I think I'm gonna hike up the drainage a little bit and look around. So we were hiking up the drainage. Well, we ended up finding, first of all, we found two mines. which one of them was hard rock all the way back in. There's no props or anything, and it went back maybe 100 feet or something. Not a long ways, but if you was chiseling that rock out with a hammer and a chisel or something, it was a long ways. Yeah. But it didn't have to have wood props or anything, and that's as far back as it went. And so it was kind of fun to go back in, look around, but not really much to see. And then we found another one, and we didn't really explore it too much because the entrance was just about non-existent. You had to get down, slide in on your belly, and then it was about nearly a 45-degree pitch once you got in there, and it was in pretty good shape. But you just about slide. You had a hard time climbing back out, but it just went down a little ways, flattened out for 10 feet, and then it had a vertical drop of about 10, 15 feet. Well, we didn't have any rope or anything with us, and so that's as far as we got in. A 10-foot drops. Yep. You're going to be there. You don't have a rope or some equipment, and you go down there, and you might be there for the rest of your life, which might be real short. So kind of a neat mine, and I've never been back to try to explore that more, but it was a pretty good shaft in that, and that might be something. But after we looked at that, we continued on up. And I just decided there was a little tiny drainage coming into the bigger drainage we were in that cut off to the left, and I decided to go up that a little bit. And I went up there not very far, up the southern drainage, and here was one of those things I was talking about. There was immediately when you go up there, people hunting or that might walk right through the middle of it and never know, but I have people ask me that all the time. They say, well, how do you find all this stuff and that? And I says, you find what you're looking for. If I'm looking for an elk, or if I'm looking for a deer, a moose, or a bobcat, or a mountain lion or that, I'm looking for tracks, I'm looking for trails and that kind of thing. And if I find that kind of stuff, that's what I find. I can walk right through Indian ruins or outlaw or Spanish stuff and that and never even notice it's there. And that happens to people all the time, every day. And I says, when I go out, whether I'm deer hunting or no matter what I'm doing, I'm looking for anything and everything. And you can't go anywhere in the state of Utah without there being tons of stuff. It's just that most people aren't looking for it and never see it. Yeah. And so, but if you're looking for stuff, immediately when I walked up there, it was evident because it was a log cabin. Again, it's not very big, probably again about the size of this living room, maybe 20 feet by 15 feet or something like that. And the logs they used were probably nearly 12 inches wide. And there's weeds and wildflowers and stuff growing real thick up in that area where I was at. And there may be waist high or something. And where the log cabin had sat, there's no logs left at all. It totally rotted away, but no plant life would grow where the logs had sat. And so you can see a complete rectangle, and because they did dovetailing and things like that, even when you got to the corners, there'd be little stub out where no plant life on the corners and stuff. And then in the one end, there was a little rock pretty much fallen down, but maybe 3-4 foot high, rocked up fireplace in the one end of the cabin. Now that's old enough when the logs have totally rotted away that's probably Spanish. So I know about other cabins. I did work for some commercial people up there building some cabins for commercial snowmobiling and things like that, and they were up in some old mining areas and that are fairly close to there, and so I know where there's other things that date back to Pioneer Day. We looked at some of those cabins, but they're the type where the roofs are collapsing and things like that, but you can still see the old rotted logs are still there and stuff, but from early Pioneer Day. But this particular one, and the other two mines, I'm guessing were probably Pioneer Day, but the one didn't have props or anything in it, so and also because you could stand up and walk in it. Most Spanish mines you can't stand up in and walk in that, because they didn't take out material unless it had ore, gold or silver ore in it. So they would take the veins out, and they'd have the Indians go in there and mine those, and is all they needed to mine was the ore and enough room to squeeze little skinny starving to death bodies through, and that's as big as most of your Spanish mines are, and that, whereas the more modern ones, some of them I know about, you have to stoop over or something, but most of them you can stand up and walk in, and you might reach out and touch them on the sides of that. Those are not Spanish mines. That's way too much work for what the Spanish wanted. They just wanted to go in and take out the ore and be done with it. So
with that said, man, we got the Moonlight Gathering coming up. This 2023. It's going to be the last weekend in July, Friday and Saturday. So we kind of already covered Friday's speaker, Saturday's speaker. What can you tell me about True Otten? I know he's going to be talking about the Egyptians in the Grand Canyon, and you probably don't know exactly what he's going to talk about, but I'll tell you, he had some connections in Washington, D.C., high up government officials that gave him a lot of information. But you've done some research on the Egyptians in the Grand Canyon. Tell me a little bit about what you know about the Egyptians in the Grand Canyon, so that they know when they hear True, man, he got it right from some of the government officials.
Yeah, the True Ott story, Terry, if I can't be there because of my health, you're gonna have to come and give me a word for word on that, because I'm real excited about. The way I understand it, and I haven't asked True Ott, I know True, but I haven't asked him how new the information is that he's got, but I think it's fairly new. I chased it quite a few years ago. I chased the Grand Canyon stuff, and I knew I met a guy here in Utah who had a nephew that lived down in Arizona who was connected with the Grand Canyon stuff, and at that particular time years ago, I haven't kept up with it, but at that particular time there was 3 groups that I know of for sure that were all trying to get information on it. For those of you, well, I don't want to give away the whole story, but just to give you an idea what's going on, and maybe we need to back up. I don't know if we need to say who True Ott is or not, but True Ott is a national figure. He's has radio programs and different things that are nationwide and those kind of things, and I'll just leave it at that until you either look him up or you come out to his presentation. But very knowledgeable guy, knows lots of interesting top secret stuff and those kinds of things. And so but anyway, so he's going to be talking about, well, back in the early or late 1800s, early 1900s, one of the early river expeditions going down through the Grand Canyon in the rafts and mapping and all those kind of things came across a opening in the side of Grand Canyon. Again, I'm not going to go into detail here, but it was published in newspapers in some of the towns back in the early 1900s, and they found fabulous stuff, a huge underground city, and they found artwork, and they found rooms with sarcophagus and mummies, and they just found all kinds of stuff, and the area is, and nobody knows why, but the area is illegal by federal government. You can't go in that area of the Grand Canyon. But according to the newspapers and that, before it was all over, one of the main characters from Smithsonian came out, and they supposedly took quite a few train car loads of artifacts back to Smithsonian, and then
we're not talking Indian artifacts.
Yeah,
we're talking Egyptian-like or Oriental-like artifacts.
Yeah, Egyptian or Oriental type artifacts and statues and things like that. But quite a fantastic story. But it's been out for a long time because it was published in newspapers. I've got copies of the newspaper reports. A lot of people have. Apparently, they're going to be telling some new stuff. A few things that I could tell you maybe to add to his presentation is when I was chasing it, this person that I was introduced to, never met him face to face, this nephew of a friend of mine. We chatted back and forth on the internet. This is way before Facebook and all that ever thought of existence. But he belonged to a group, and Fox News actually went with his group at one time. And I know of 2 other groups that were going at the same time. The particular group that I got involved with figured that if this is a huge city, they're saying there could be population in the tens or hundreds of thousands of people underground. I mean, huge underground city in that. And they figured if there was that many people in it, there had to be multiple openings, and there had to be air shafts and all kinds of stuff. So they were up on top of the Grand Canyon trying to find air shafts and those kinds of things, and trying to find other openings and those kinds of things. While their group was out there, they were under surveillance by the federal government with stealth vehicles. They had 2 stealth vehicles watching them, and they told me the stories about them. One of them, they were able to take some pictures of one of the stealth vehicles, which he sent me copies of that, about the size of a car, made no sound at all, but was flying around watching them. And that the other one they figured was about the size of one of those big helicopters that has the 2 big blades, one on either end, and they could hear it, but they couldn't see it. And there was about 40 or 50 people in the group, and Fox News and that. But those were the 2 stealth vehicles, and they told quite a story in that. But like I say, Fox News was with them. They spent quite a bit of time down there. But I know for sure there was at least 2 other groups at the same time that were going down in the bottom of the Grand Canyon, talking to the Indian tribes and getting information of that. And now I think a bunch more information has come out on this. I chased it even further than that myself personally, because the main guy from Smithsonian, they published his name in the newspaper articles back in about 1900 and that. And so I met a guy who had been he actually used to be manager of one of the ski resorts here in Utah, and I got to know him through my job, and we talked quite a bit about different stuff. But this is his have fun retired job, working at the ski resort. But what he did during his life was he was high up with Smithsonian. And so I asked him about this guy specifically, because I figured, well, if they were making up a story and just throwing names out, making them up, and that would be an easy one to debunk right away. And of course, when you chase a lot of this stuff, if you're trying to prove it to be true, a lot of stuff there's a lot of ways to chase things, but one of the ways I chase things is trying to figure out what's true in a story and what isn't when I'm told stories. And so I was trying to find out if there was things I could put my finger on and say, I know this to be a fact, that this part of their story, they would have had to at least do some research to come up with some of the information in the newspaper articles and that. So I was chasing some of those kind of things, and he confirmed that. He says, yeah, that guy at that particular time, that he was in charge of Smithsonian or whatever. So, but that's been several years ago, and like I say, if there's new stuff out, I'm real excited to hear it. So well, yeah, stay tuned for the rest of the story, because like I said, True had connections with a lot of the top government officials that funneled him some information that wasn't meant to get out to the regular public. So we'll see what he has to say. With that said, Kent, man, I hope to see everybody out there. And what else can they expect here at the Moonlight Gathering? Oh, geez. Dale Bascom are going to be talking Spanish mines and treasures and those kind of things, and they're of the best versed people in the state of Utah on those. On the Spanish treasure. On the Spanish stuff. They're published. They're extremely knowledgeable. I can sit and be hypnotized by them for hours at a time with their knowledge and their stories they tell. They'll be some of the best people still alive today that can give you some of that stuff that they'll be telling you. Let's see, who else have we got coming? We do have planned also. We've got Saturday during the day. We have some little mini classes about, if it all comes together the way we want, we'll be teaching people how to dowse and what dowsing's all about, and
I've got a guy that's going to teach you how to hunt for pocket gold. He's going to be there teaching that.
Okay.
Some dowsings.
But we haven't got everything 100% put together, but it's a big majority of what we got come together. Also, we've got Gardner, Greg Gardner, that owns the lodge up at Moon Lake and runs the cabin rentals and that up there, and he's also got the bed and breakfast and little ma pa kind of grocery store gas station there in Mountain Home. And he's going to bring, tell me what the name of the machine is again?
An XRF gun.
XRF gun that's quite a few thousands of dollars. He will charge a fee. We don't know what that's going to be yet, but if you happen to have rocks that you've collected 30 years ago out in your backyard that you think is gold ore or silver ore or whatever in that, and you've ever wanted to have that assayed or really looked at close, for a fee, he's just bought this, a brand new piece of equipment he's got that's super fancy, and he will do a readout on it and tell you everything that's in your ore samples and that. There will be a charge, and if you keep tune with our Facebook channel, I think before you're ever coming out there, you'll be told what the fees are, so you won't have too much shell shock if you bring something up there. But that could be real exciting if you've got some pieces that you think you know where you got them, and you might be into your $1 billion mine or something. This is a good opportunity for you to have Greg look at it and say, yeah, you need to develop this.
For that guy last year, that he only showed just a select few people. He showed me and you. He thought they was old Spanish coins that he found, but they look older than that to me. They look Roman. It would have been super interesting to have one of them shot to see what the makeup of it was, to categorize it against some of the old Roman coins, some of the old, to see if it matched up or anything like that. So, yeah. I've
got some pretty good chunks down in my office of ore that are nearly pure silver, I think. I don't claim to be an expert, but I've got quite a bit of geology stuff in that. But I think it's horn silver and that's nearly pure with visible gold in it. Which, if that's the case, that's super rich in gold if you can see it without a magnifying glass or anything. And that would be a piece, for example, that I would love to have Greg shoot it. I'm just a poor guy, so I'd have to find out how much he's charging. But I think we'll know that and have that posted. So those of you that may want to bring some.
Was not cheap. It was like $30,000 or $40,000 it costed him. This is the top of the line thing. So he is going to be charging people to try and recoup some of his money. It cost him a lot of money to buy this thing. This is a brand new top of the line thing. So
I know other people here in the state of Utah that have. I'm sure it's an older model because his is about brand new. But I know people here in Utah that have the guns, and they get hired to go to African places to shoot ore veins and tell them how rich they are, and that clear from here in Utah. So aside from the price of the gun, the trip to go to Africa or different places in the world and use them, they're in high demand and that kind of thing. And that so this is something that you're not going to find somewhere else. In fact, you may not even find it if you went in a specific assay office or something. The piece of equipment he's going to have that he can tell you what kind of ore samples you've got and those kind of things if you've got something. So another good feature of what we do every year.
So there'll be a lot of stories being told. There'll be a lot of small circles. You see a small circle of people, man, you might want to eavesdrop and hear what they're talking about, because there'll be a lot of secrets told at this thing, and they don't really want to talk to everybody about it. We're going to be having an open mic where people can get up and tell stories, but treasure hunters, man, we're kind of a secretive lot, man. We don't like to tell our stories to everybody, but they'll be talking in small circles. So, man, if you see a small circle, eavesdrop on them.
Yeah, I've had quite a few people that really want me to take them out to a spot where we can just load up the back of the pickup truck and hopefully not have to hike more than a few feet to pick them up. and those kinds of things are usually kept pretty tight and pretty quiet as to where those kinds of places are. Some of my stories are about that good. I know where there's quite a bit of Spanish gold. Unfortunately, most of it's on Indian ground, and if you go up there without permission, that you're going to get yourself in a lot of trouble. And I can tell some good stories about people that have done just that too.
And we're going to be right there on the Indian boundaries.
Yeah, we're going to be on the Indian boundary, and there's a lot of Spanish stuff over there. And my word to you on that is don't do anything illegal on Indian boundary. Not just because you'll get in a lot of trouble, but we don't want to cross grain with the Indian tribes up there.
Yep. So with that said, man, we'll see everybody the last weekend in July at the Outlaw Park, right? The main drainage where everything drains down the Uin Mountains, where most of the Spanish activity happened. Right there, Rock Creek to Moonlight to Yellowstone, right down to the drainages go right down to this area right here, the Outlaw Park. And so we'll see everybody there, and that's a wrap.